evening, everyone, and welcome back to 6-7 News. I'm Sebastian Barron, your host for today. And today's story is all about collisions. Not the kind that you see on freeways, but the kind that happen when two cars crash into each other on a physics track. So here's the deal. When two objects collide, something interesting happens. The momentum, which basically means mass in motion, has to go somewhere. Physics tells us that the total momentum before and after a collision should be the same. That's the big idea behind conservation of momentum. But there's another part to the story, kinetic energy, or how much energy the objects have while they're moving. And unlike momentum, that one can actually change depending on the type of collision. So now in our experiment, we're looking at two main kinds of collisions, elastic and inelastic. An elastic collision is when two objects bounce off each other without losing energy, like two super bouncy balls smacking together and flying apart again. On the other hand, an inelastic collision is when things get messy. The objects might stick together, or some of the energy turns into heat or sound. So our main goal in this lab is to test how momentum and kinetic energy act in both situations. We use cards on the track and measure the moment before and after they hit each other. We then compared what we saw in the physics equations say should happen. In theory, momentum should always be conserved, but kinetic energy might not be, especially in an inelastic collisions. So throughout this lab, we're trying to figure out if that theory really holds up. Do we really see the same total momentum before and after a collision? And does that energy stay the same, or some of it disappear into sound or heat? Those are some of the questions we try to answer. But before we dive into all that data and talk about what our results mean, none of this could happen without the right setup. So to give you all a closer look on how we pull this off and what tools we use to make these collisions happen, I'll pass it over to my lab partner who's reporting live from the materials desk.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is Isaac reporting live from the physics lab, where we've been using motion sensors and dynamic cards to explore how momentum and kinetic energy behaves in different types of collisions. For this experiment, we set up two carts on a low friction track with a motion sensor placed at one end to measure velocity before and after impact. We use magnetic end studs on the carts to switch between elastic and inelastic collisions. Magnets allow the carts to repel each other for elastic collisions, while the studs made them stick together for inelastic ones. By adjusting the weights of the carts, we tested both equal mass and different mass scenarios. The Capstone software recorded our data and created graphs showing momentum and kinetic energy for each trial. Our results showed that momentum stayed nearly the same before and after every collision, confirming the conservation of momentum. However, kinetic energy behaved differently. During elastic collisions, it was mostly conserved, while in elastic ones, a noticeable portion was lost to heat and deformation. These findings matched our theoretical expectations and highlighted how the type of collision and materials used to affect energy transfer. This is Isaac signing off from the lab, reminding everyone that every experiment starts with motion and ends with discovery.
Good evening. I'm your host for this evening, Fernanda Torres, covering the procedure we did for our Lab 8 experiment. In this lab, we looked at collision, specifically elastic and inelastic collision. We used given formulas to calculate momentum and kinetic energy. We used two cards with magnets attached to them and a glider to place them and record the collision data with Capstone. We used a single point in time to calculate the before and after the collision with graphs on Capstone. We tested elastic collision with the same mass and different masses, then inelastic collision with the same and different masses, in total 4 experiments. We used the given graph to keep track of our data, and we then compared and looked for the percent differences. Now, here's us in action. Here we are, weighing the cars first to find their initial weights. This will help us when we start adding weight later. Then this is us doing the actual experiment, non-weighted and weighted. As you can see, there's a big difference in the collisions where there was mass and where there wasn't. This can be applied in real life with any moving vehicle. Now, thank you for tuning in this evening. I'll see you next week for our last lab. Good night.
Be going over more of the studies and experiments over at the local university here in El Paso at UTEP. Again, I'm your co-host, Mateo Barasa. Let's get right into it. So for this experiment, we went over elastic and inelastic collisions. Elastic collisions being when colliding objects rebound without any lasting deformation to either object or without generating heat. So think of my hands crashing into each other. There's nothing really getting deformed or no heat is really generated. Whereas inelastic collisions are going to be like getting a ball of white clay and throwing it at a wall, and the ball will deform once it hits the wall. So that object deforms. That would be classified as a inelastic collision. Or think of two things sticking together once they hit each other. So if my hands had Velcro on them, this would be a inelastic collision. So to analyze this relationship, we used a blue car and a red car on a track and crashed them into each other. So our blue car had a positive magnet and our red car had a negative magnet. So once they collided, they rebounded away from each other. So that was our elastic collision. And for our inelastic collision, we had a piece of Velcro on either end of the car. So when they collided, they stuck together and went off to one end of the track. And so some of the numbers, analyzing some of the data here, we can see that our blue mass to start was 265.4 grams. And our red mass was 276.4 grams, which is 0.2654 kilograms, and for the red, 0.2764 kilograms. Sorry about that. And then we added about 0.5 kilograms to the blue car, and that led us with 0.765 kilograms. So looking at this table, we can analyze the differences with our elastic and inelastic collisions. So first and foremost, we can see the kinetic energy is a lot more with our elastic collision, whereas with our inelastic collision, the kinetic energy is magnitude smaller, almost negligible. And that's illustrated right here and right here. We can also see the differences once we increase the mass right here and down here. So with the first one, we ended up getting about 0.09 to start, then our kinetic was 0.02, and then again, we ended with negative 0.11, and that was after the collision with our elastic. And so our total for our sums were negative 0.03 and then 0 for our kinetic energy value, which makes sense because they are colliding and rebound. And then right here after, we see the value getting smaller, bigger. And then for our inelastic, we see a different relationship. So again, this one is still very similar. We still end up with 0, but on our P to start with, it looks quite different right over here. And that's all illustrated right here, which is what I first said. And then we have these values right down here to further illustrate that. Again, thank you so much for tuning in with us. I was analyzing our data. Again, I'm your co-host, Mateo Barasa. I'm going to pass it on to my other host, Oliver Almesquita.
Good evening. I'm your host, Oliver Mesquita, and welcome back to Late Night 6-7 News. Tonight, Team 6-7 set out to explore one of physics' most important principles, conservation of momentum, and also to see how energy behaves when things collide or crash into each other. In this lab, we explored both elastic and inelastic collisions using Pasco carts, Pasco motion sensor, and the capsule software. The main difference being instead of graphing it with position and time, we graphed it with respect to kinetic energy and momentum. So we started with elastic collisions, two cards of the same mass and two cards of different mass, using magnets at the end of them to repel each other. For the two cards of the same mass, the magnets did a pretty good job of repelling each other actually. They pretty much didn't even touch. They weren't traveling at super high speeds either, so it was a pretty ideal setup. The graph showed that the momentum was conserved, the kinetic energy was conserved for the most part, so it behaved pretty much according to theory, like we expected. But when we moved to a weighted or cards of different mass, we put a weight on one card. The elastic collision was a little bit more complicated. One card absorbed more of the momentum than the other one, so it still came out consistent with the theory, but the kinetic energy did drop a little bit, which wasn't exactly ideal. But this is a real world scenario, you could say, a simulated one, so it's not going to be perfect with theory either way. Then we switched to inelastic trials. Same thing, both same mass and different mass setups. When we removed the magnets, so the cards actually collided and even stuck together, the momentum stayed roughly conserved. The kinetic energy dropped noticeably, which makes sense. That's pretty according to theory. The energy turns to sound, heat, small deformations on a molecular level, a lot of factors. And then we added extra weights to the card, which made the elastic collisions or the inelastic collisions even faster. There's a big noticeable drop in kinetic energy there, as the heavier card absorbed more of the impact. Overall, our results pretty much supported what theory was already saying. Momentum is always conserved, but kinetic energy isn't. At least not once real-world factors like friction, imperfect contact, even the weight sliding around, maybe something like that, come into play. Overall, this experiment gives a clear visual of how energy and momentum behave or interact with even small changes. And that concludes tonight's coverage of Team 67's Lab 8. I'm Oliver Mesquita, signing off from Late Night 67 News. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you in the next lab.